So what about, you mentioned that about 20% of people exposed to one form of trauma or another come down with PTSD or, a major need for therapy, for treatment. What's happening with the other 80%? In your book, you kind of emphasize that we're all built to be homeostatic organisms,
Right.
self-regulating. So let's talk about what happens. Let's talk about that side of it a bit.
Well, for the other 80% that don't develop PTSD, I've got to assume that they have been able to process their traumatic experience in their own way with the support of other people. We all go through experiences on a day-to-day basis, and we process through experiences, non-traumatic experiences, right? We go to a party, we see our friends, we make conversation, we eat good food, and that night we come home. Maybe we talk with our partner about it. We reflect on the experience. Maybe we go to sleep that night. We dream about it. But by the next day, we have moved that experience along and put it up on the shelf as a past memory. That's the way most people will process through traumatic experiences as well. They'll talk about it. They'll dream about it. They'll write about it. They'll cry about it. They'll reflect on it with somebody who they feel safe with. They'll read about trauma, they'll make meaning out of it, and they'll move on from it.
They'll find songs, they'll find music right. that elicits those feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're lucky enough to have that support in your life, to have the time and the space to process through, then you're not going to necessarily develop PTSD. But for significant traumatic experiences or prolonged chronic traumatic experiences, that trauma gets frozen or locked in the nervous system, and it gets locked in the nervous system along with all of the component parts of the trauma, the feelings, the sensations, the cognitions, and there it lies in the nervous system waiting to get reactivated when along comes a trigger that brings it up again, and it may activate that entire constellation of experience, right? The feelings, the sensations, the images, or it might just activate some component of it. So the sadness, the grief, the terror. Often people don't recognize that they're having trauma-based symptoms because just the emotional parts of what they experience get activated. They don't necessarily get the images or the story with it, just the felt experience in their body or the emotions. So in those cases, when those memories remain in the nervous system, you need something more than just talking about it, just reflecting on it. And that's where EMDR comes into it.
Yeah. Now, some of the people I've interviewed have gone so far to say that we're all traumatized. We're all victims of trauma. And indeed, we're going through a situation right now with pandemic. I'll say pandemics because I'm not convinced that it's over.
Yes, right.
And the global climate crisis. So there are major things that that I think are pretty traumatizing. So I'm ready to buy into the idea that we're all dealing with a certain level of trauma.
Yeah.
What about the people who will not come to therapy because they can't afford it, or culturally it's not on their radar, or a whole array of reasons? Are there self therapies or other practices that people can engage in that would help them move through things without therapy?
Well, I think, as you said, we're in the midst of a mental health crisis right now. And I think that there are many things that trauma survivors can do on their own to facilitate healing. Learning something as simple as breathing and self-regulation skills, learning how to journal, learning how to use artwork, are things that trauma survivors, or, you know, even somebody that would not consider themselves a trauma survivor, but just somebody who's having a hard time with the stressors of our world, like you said, as we're all feeling anxiety about climate change, about the pandemic. There are many things that we can do that that help us to process through those feelings, process through the material that's somehow stuck and lingering in our nervous system. What's really nice is there seems to be some kind of trauma recovery conference or healing from trauma and PTSD summit being offered online almost every week these days. Many of them are free or very, very low cost. They have many speakers with lots of different kinds of interventions offered to those that have been affected by trauma. And there are many, many outstanding self-help books that can guide survivors in their healing journey, you know, offering valuable psychoeducation and an introduction to coping skills and exercises that offer a lot of benefits. On our website, which is everymemorydeservesrespect.com, we have a whole list of books and websites that are useful, that are potentially useful to trauma survivors. But I will say that I think to achieve long-lasting and comprehensive transformation, traumatic memories must be activated and processed. You know, so for those folks that aren't finding themselves able to move on, carry on with their day-to-day activities, you know, that really are plagued by the symptoms of PTSD, we have to get at those traumatic memories and they have to be processed. And for this component of one's healing journey, I think it's critical to work with a well-trained trauma-informed therapist, you know, and of course, I would recommend working with a therapist trained and experienced in EMDR. But I think the important thing is to say there's a lot that you can do on your own, but when you're not getting the relief you're looking for, it's really critical to find someone to help you with that piece.